Good evening, night wanderers. Welcome aboard the Midnight Caravan. Tonight, we're going back into the Appalachian mountains, to a cabin that should have stayed empty. If you're new here, say hello in the comments and tell me where you're listening from. And if these stories keep you awake, don't forget to subscribe and hit like, so I know you made it through another night. I've been a park ranger in the southern Appalachians for 8 years. Night shift isn't glamorous. It's a mix of loneliness, damp cold, and endless check-ins on cabins nobody's used since the 1940s. I liked that part. The silence. The sense that the woods were asleep, and I was the only thing awake enough to listen. They call my section Ridge 9. It's 5 miles of overgrown road and one old WPA cabin from the Depression era. The locals say CCC boys built it, and that a fire killed 3 of them during construction. I never put stock in that talk. Until that night. It was mid-November, fog thick as soup, my shift starting at 2200 hours. Dispatch wanted me to confirm visual smoke near the ridgeline. I figured it was kids camping, maybe lighting a brush pile. But when I stepped out of the truck, the smell hit me. Creosote, burnt sap, and something sharp, almost metallic. I scanned the slope with my flashlight. The beam caught what looked like smoke, a thin silver ribbon sliding sideways through the trees. It wasn't rising, just drifting, low and smooth like it knew exactly where it wanted to go. I radioed in. Unit 9, visual on column, no visible flame. Static. Then the operator's voice broke through. Copy 9, no burns scheduled, proceed with caution. The wind was dead. The woods were so quiet I could hear my own pulse. Every footstep crunched loud on the gravel. When I reached the cabin clearing, the smoke was already there, coiling around the roof like a leash. The building itself looked normal enough. 1-room log structure, stone chimney, rusted stovepipe. I'd logged dozens of checks on it before. Always cold, always empty. But this time, the doorknob was warm. Not hot, just body temperature warm, like someone had been gripping it moments earlier. I opened the door. The smell inside was wrong. Old cabins have a musty odor, dust, dead mice, mold, but this was sweet and chemical, like burnt plastic and wet cedar mixed together. My flashlight caught the hearth. No ash, no soot, not even a wood chip. The stovepipe was spotless, yet my throat stung as if I'd walked through smoke. I took a step forward. My boot left a print in the dust, next to another that wasn't mine. Smaller, bare, and slightly wet. Hello? I called. The sound came back softer, warped, like it had to squeeze through something thick, before returning. I told myself maybe a hiker had taken shelter earlier. Maybe condensation had settled near the door. But when I knelt to inspect the footprints, I noticed they didn't lead into the cabin. They started in the middle of the room and walked toward the exit. The back of my neck prickled. I turned off my flashlight just to listen. No breathing, no footsteps, just the faint hiss of air moving through the stovepipe cap. Then I realized something. There was no draft tonight, no wind outside, and yet that stovepipe was whistling. A single soft note, like someone exhaling through their teeth. It rose in pitch until it matched my own breathing. I held my breath. The whistle didn't stop. It kept going, steady, patient, like something on the other end was still breathing for me. My chest tightened. I backed toward the door, but the air shifted. The faint silver haze I'd followed outside was now inside, coiling in front of me, thin and deliberate. It floated upward, hovered over the hearth, then bent, slowly, toward my face. The smell of creosote filled my nose again, stronger this time, sharper. I opened my mouth to shout, and that's when I saw it. The smoke was moving toward me, not away, slipping straight into my open mouth like a thread being pulled through a needle. My lungs burned cold. My vision flickered. I staggered back, knocking the log door half shut behind me. When I exhaled, the smoke didn't leave. It stayed, hanging between my teeth like it belonged there. It's hard to explain the sensation of breathing something that doesn't want to be air. The smoke felt thin and slick, like fishing line dragging across the back of my throat. I clamped my mouth shut, swallowed hard, and lurched out onto the porch where the fog hung like wet fabric. I gulped cold night air until my lungs hurt. The thread loosened. For a second, I thought I'd beaten it. I went for the radio. Dispatch, Unit 9, possible hazardous vapor inside WPA cabin, requesting air monitor and backup. My thumb shook on the transmit key. Copy Unit 9. Location verify? The voice sounded bored in that comforting way. Ridge 9, mile marker 2.7, I said. I coughed. A soft gray curl slipped between my teeth. I've got smoke without flame. A pause. Then, you're not assigned Ridge 9 to Night 9. Clarify. I stared at the mic. I'm physically here. Negative, the voice said, darker now. Ridge 9 is empty. The radio hissed like it was breathing. I let go. I tried the rational route. Tools, procedures, distance. I went around to the back of the cabin where the old stovepipe ran into the stone chimney. I touched the metal. Cold. I unlatched the cap and swung it aside to check for a bird nest or fallen debris. Inside, the pipe walls were too clean. Not polished. Erased. Even the usual insect husks were gone, like someone had wiped the world to a blank. From the open door came that same long whistle, thin as a needle. It matched my pulse until I couldn't tell which was leading. Enough, I said out loud. Hearing my own voice steadied me. I decided to clear the structure the way we're trained. I pulled the bandana from my pocket, tied it across my mouth and nose, and stepped in with my flashlight high. The damp footprints had multiplied, bare, small, staggered, as if someone was walking while not learning how to walk. They started in different places and ended in the same one. The door. I swept the walls, the cot, the joists. Nothing moved. But in the beam, dust motes didn't float randomly. They drifted in one direction, toward me. I took another step, and the dust accelerated like iron filings to a magnet. The bandana went damp in an instant, sweeter smelling than sweat, like wet cedar and a hint of melted plastic. The wrong sweetness. Identify yourself, I said, because my brain needed rules. This is federal property. The whistle softened. A voice, just under it, answered from the stovepipe. We're inside. We? I said, and hated how small it sounded. Borrow a breath? The voice asked. Gentle, hopeful, boyish, and old at once. I backpedaled, tripped on the cot frame, and went down hard. The flashlight skittered across the floor. The beam rolled and found the hearth. No ashes, no wood, just bricks with hairline cracks like charred skin. The cracks pulsed. Not visually, you felt it through your eyes more than saw it. A slow flex, inhale, exhale. I crawled for the door. When my hand touched the threshold, the latch clicked. The door swung shut. Okay, I panted. Okay. I still had the keys. I still had the truck. I could smash a window if I had to. My shoulder would pay for it later. That's a later problem. I pushed up to stand. The room tilted. The floor sloped a degree, then a degree more, as if the cabin had decided it was built wrong and was correcting itself while I watched. Nails whispered in their holes. The joists creaked like backs stretching after a long sit. I braced against the wall and felt warmth under the log. Heat, faint but alive, pulsed with the whistle. Don't run, the voice said from the pipe. It was closer now, like the pipe had bent down beside my ear. It hurts when you run. I bolted anyway. The door gave after a hard yank. I stumbled onto the porch, took 2 steps, and stopped dead. The fog had thickened into walls. My truck should have been a straight shot across the clearing. Instead, the clearing had narrowed, trees nudging closer than they'd ever grown. Bark drank the beam of my light. My tire ruts had filled with shallow, silvery water that reflected nothing. I followed the ruts because rules are anchors. 10 steps in, they ended. Not drifted out, not washed, ended, as if a giant eraser had dragged across the ground. Something shifted behind me. Not a footstep. A settling. The cabin exhaled so gently the porch light rocked on its nail. I did the only thing left. I tried the trail. The CCC steps felt steeper than they should have. My boots slid on leaves slick as tongues. Behind me, the whistle kept pace, always the same distance away, never tiring. At the top switchback, I made the mistake of looking back. The cabin window glowed steady orange, and in that square I saw a silhouette. A ranger hat, shoulders, a raised hand holding a radio. My radio crackled in perfect sync. "Unit 9, my own voice said from my belt, calm as a clean report. "Confirm, door secured." I pulled the batteries. The radio kept talking. The fog around me lightened, not to reveal the truck, but a second cabin ahead, same logs, same roofline, where no building should be. 2 cabins now, like mirrors pressed face to face, with me between their breaths. I understood then. It didn't want me to leave. It wanted me to choose. I took a step toward the nearer door, and the fog drew a second set of bare, wet prints to match mine, walking toward the other. For a few seconds, I just stood there between those 2 cabins, unable to tell which was real. Both doors hung open. Both breathed that faint creosote sweetness, and both whispered through the fog with the same low hum, like a giant sleeping under the soil. I tried to think like a ranger, orientation, landmarks, direction of slope, but the forest didn't match any map I knew. The ground between the cabins had gone soft, like packed ash after a burn. Each step sank an inch, leaving a perfect footprint that filled instantly with black water. The whistle came again, from both directions this time. 2 notes, one sharp, one low, like the cabins were calling to each other. I turned slowly toward the nearer one. "All right," I whispered. "You want a breath? You've got mine." I walked forward, forcing my boots to keep time with my heartbeat. The open door shuddered slightly, a sigh escaping from inside. When I crossed the threshold, the air pressed against my chest, warm and thick, like standing inside an animal's lungs. Everything looked familiar: cot, stove, dusty table, same as before. But the footprints on the floor were reversed. They led from the door to the hearth. My flashlight beam caught movement above the stove, something twisting just under the surface of the metal, a faint white glow moving like veins under skin. "Unit 9, my own voice murmured from the radio. "Breath stable, column contained." I froze. "Who's transmitting?" No answer. Just the sound of breathing, slow and deliberate, perfectly matching mine. Then I noticed the photograph tacked above the cot. I'd never seen it before. Black and white, curled at the edges, 3 CCC men in coveralls standing outside this very cabin. Only one detail didn't fit. The figure on the right was wearing a modern ranger uniform, my uniform, and in the photo his face was nothing but pale blur and smoke. The whistle grew louder, vibrating through my ribs. The stovepipe started to tremble, its thin metal shaking like it was about to sing. I backed toward the door. "Borrow," the voice said again, softer now, almost pleading. "It hurts to stay hollow." I didn't answer. I ran. Outside, the fog thinned for just a heartbeat. I saw the road again, and the gleam of my truck's windshield. I sprinted for it, every step echoing with a second set behind me, bare feet slapping mud, keeping pace. When I slammed the truck door, the sound stopped. The key turned once, twice. Nothing. The third time, the engine caught, coughing smoke through the exhaust. But what came out wasn't gray. It was white, thin, human. It pressed itself flat against the glass, forming the faint shape of a face. My own. "Breathe," it mouthed. I jammed the truck in reverse, the headlights flashed across the ridge, and for the briefest second, I saw the two cabins merge, walls folding into each other like reflections. The smoke between them twisted, then shot straight up, a pillar vanishing into cloud. The fog fell still. I didn't stop driving until the forest thinned and the ranger station lights broke through. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely key the mic. Dispatch, Unit 9, reporting, an incident at Ridge 9 cabin, possible structural hazard, possible gas vent. Send, Ridge 9, the dispatcher said. That cabin burned down in '73. We don't assign patrols there anymore. My stomach dropped. No, I said. I was just there. It's standing. Copy that, she said carefully. We'll send someone in daylight. They didn't find a cabin, just charred stone, old nails, and one melted metal cap where a stovepipe used to be. That night, I coughed up black flecks that smelled like creosote. The doctor called it chemical irritation, said to rest, said I was lucky. But I'm not sleeping anymore. I can't. Because when I breathe too deep, I see a wisp rise from my lips, thin, silver, alive, and for just a moment, I smell the mountains burning. And sometimes, if I'm quiet enough, I hear a radio whisper from nowhere. Unit 9, confirm column contained. If you ever hike Ridge 9 and the fog smells sweet, don't breathe in. Something up there still needs air, and it already knows your lungs will fit. I booked cheap cabins to get away from work. No Wi-Fi, no cell bars, just a place with clean sheets and a coffee pot that doesn't hiss. When you spend all week in front of spreadsheets, silence starts to feel like medicine. This one was near a town that barely showed up on GPS, somewhere in the southern Appalachians. The rental listing said, Rustic Writer's Retreat, built 1932, maintained by owner on site. The price was low, the reviews fine. I didn't think twice. By the time I got there, twilight was washing over the ridge. The retreat was a squat A-frame with green shingles, sitting under a big oak that hummed with cicadas. A binder sat on the table inside labeled, Welcome Guests, in cheerful block letters. The first page was a list of house rules written in pencil. No fires in the hearth after 10 p.m. Don't leave the porch light on overnight. If you hear footsteps on the roof, stay indoors. That last one made me laugh. Some kind of local joke, I figured. But the rest of the place felt fine, clean enough, cozy even. I unpacked, made coffee, and watched the trees turn black outside the window. It was quiet in a way I hadn't realized I'd missed. Just the wind pressing softly against the glass and the occasional pop of settling boards. I spent the evening reading. When I went to bed, I glanced at the binder again. The rules were still there, faint graphite letters, slightly smudged from someone's hand. Morning came with fog so thick the windows looked painted white. I made eggs, opened the binder again to find a local map, and froze. The rules were still on the first page, but they looked different. The handwriting was identical, but darker, sharper, written in pen, every line the same except for a new one at the bottom. 4. Don't go outside until you've written your name in the guest book. There was a guest book on the counter, brown leather with a broken spine. I hadn't touched it last night. The page was open to a blank space under a name I couldn't quite read. Letters tangled like roots. My pulse started to thump in my ears. I told myself it had to be my mistake. Maybe I'd looked at the wrong page. Maybe the host stopped by and recopied the rules. Still, it felt off. I hadn't seen another car on the road up here. I stepped out onto the porch to check. The fog was worse now, like the world had been erased beyond 10 feet. The porch light was still on from last night, even though I'd switched it off before bed. I reached to flick it again. The bulb hummed faintly, glowing in rhythm with my heartbeat. Inside, the air felt warmer. I made another pot of coffee to shake the nerves. Then I noticed something else. The pencil I'd left on the table beside my open notebook was gone. In its place lay a cheap black pen, the clicky kind hotels give out, with my name printed neatly in white ink along the barrel. I didn't own that pen. I went to the door, meaning to get some air, but when I turned the knob, it wouldn't budge. The wood didn't rattle, didn't stick, it just refused like the whole doorframe was flexing inward. The binder on the table flipped open by itself, landing on a new page. Fresh ink bled through the paper. Rule 5. Don't leave until you've finished writing. That's when the floor creaked behind me, soft and measured, the sound of someone stepping carefully so the boards wouldn't complain. I turned, but the cabin was empty. At least it looked empty, until I saw the coffee steam curling upward, tracing faint letters in the air above the mug. Welcome back. The worst part wasn't the message. It was that the steam was rising from 2 mugs, and I'd only poured 1. I froze where I stood, staring at the 2 mugs on the counter. One was mine, steaming gently. The other sat beside it, identical, down to the chipped rim, but cold, the handle damp with condensation. I touched it. The porcelain was clammy, as if it had been outside all night. Hello? My voice sounded too loud in the small cabin. Anybody here? Nothing answered, except the coffee maker clicking as it cooled. I told myself I was overreacting. Someone could have come in while I slept. The owner, maybe? Dropped by to check the power? But that didn't explain the locked door, or the fact that I hadn't heard the hinges creak. I grabbed my phone to call the number from the rental listing. No service, not a single bar. Figures. Okay, fine. I'd leave a note, drive back toward the highway, call from there. I started writing on a loose scrap of paper. Stopped by, couldn't reach you, something strange with the binder. My pen stalled. The ink had turned gray. I tried again. Same thing. The line darkened to charcoal black, then began bleeding backward, swallowing the words I'd just written until the page went blank. I dropped the pen. It rolled off the counter and came to rest against my boot. My name gleamed along the barrel again, white letters perfectly clean. That's when I noticed the window. Last night it had been fogged over. But now faint shapes moved in the mist beyond the glass, soft silhouettes of trees and something taller. At first I thought it was a person. Then it swayed wrong, like it had too many joints. I stepped back. The shape turned slightly, and I swear it leaned closer, pressing against the window pane from the outside. The glass fogged around a faint outline of a face, or the idea of one. The cabin groaned as the floorboards shifted under my feet. The binder on the table snapped shut, hard enough to make me jump. When I opened it again, all the pages were blank except the first one. The rules were there, still written in dark pen. Only the wording had changed. No fires in the hearth after 10:15 p.m. Don't leave the porch light on overnight. If you hear footsteps on the roof, stay indoors. Write your name in the guest book. Finish what's been started. Don't ignore the window. I looked up just in time to see a pale hand press flat against the glass. The fingers were long, too long, and ended in dark, wet points. My stomach dropped. I backed toward the hallway that led to the bedroom. The hand slid downward with a faint squeal of nails dragging the outside of the glass. Then it vanished into the fog. Inside the guest book, the page under that messy, tangled name was no longer blank. In perfect block letters, written in black pen, was my name. First and last. I hadn't written it. The pen rolled from the counter and stopped next to my shoe again. I didn't touch it. Instead, I ran to the back door. There had to be one. Most cabins have a service entry or cellar hatch. I found it behind a curtain near the bathroom. The knob turned easily. Relief hit me like oxygen until I looked down. Fresh mud tracked across the floor just inside the threshold, bare footprints leading from outside into the house. The doorframe was splintered near the hinge. Someone had already used it. The prints stopped at the table, right where the binder sat open. The light bulb above me flickered once, twice, then steadied into a low amber glow. I looked at the window again. No face now, no shape, just fog. Then, soft and close, a voice from behind me whispered, "You forgot to sign the second page." I spun around. The binder was open again, but now the pages looked damp, the ink running in tiny veins. Across the top, written in fresh, wet pen strokes, was a new line. 7. Read aloud what's been written. The letters bled as I stared, pooling like they wanted to be spoken. I didn't realize I'd started whispering the words until the handwriting on the page began changing with my voice. Each word I read twisted darker, the ink thickening like it was feeding on the sound. The page pulsed under my fingertips. My voice shook, but I couldn't stop. It felt like something was tugging the syllables out of me, thread by thread. Rule 8. Once begun, the writing must continue until the author is known. The lights flickered again. The cabin was too quiet. Even the cicadas outside had gone silent. I slammed the binder shut and backed away. The sound echoed unnaturally, like the walls had picked it up and were whispering it back at me in smaller and smaller versions. I ran for the front door. This time, it opened easily, too easily. Fog spilled in, heavy and warm, curling around my legs like breath. The air outside wasn't fresh anymore. It carried that same sweet, chemical rot. The porch light burned a deep amber. I stepped out anyway. The forest beyond the railing was wrong. Thicker, crowding close, trees leaning inward as if listening. The fog hung higher here, not drifting but rising in thin ropes. A faint scratching drew my eyes upward. Something moved across the roof, slow, deliberate, like fingertips dragging along shingles. I remembered Rule 3. If you hear footsteps on the roof, stay indoors. I stepped back, heart hammering. "Who's there?" The sound stopped. Then a soft thump landed directly above me, dust sifting down from the ceiling inside. The binder on the table fluttered open again, its pages flipping in a storm of paper before stopping on a fresh rule. Rule 9. The host arrives when the name is complete. I looked at the guest book. My name was still there in neat ink, but now the letters were spreading, connecting, curling into strange loops, turning into something that wasn't quite English. The shape of the words stretched until it covered the whole page like veins. A single drop of black ink fell from the ceiling and landed on the open page. It spread fast, seeping through. Then came the sound of breathing, close, heavy, right above me. I lifted my gaze just in time to see the ceiling boards bulge downward, as though someone large was pressing their weight against them from the other side. The pressure creaked through the nails. One fell loose, clattering onto the table. Another. I ran toward the door again, but it slammed shut on its own, windless and final. The temperature dropped hard enough to fog my breath. The binder flipped again on its own. This time, only one sentence filled the page. Final rule: the guest becomes the host when the ink runs dry. I backed into the corner, breathing hard. "No," I whispered. "No, I'm leaving." The pen, the one with my name, rolled from the counter, stopped at my boot again, and clicked by itself. Its tip glowed faintly blue, like the eye of a pilot light. The pages of the guest book began to turn faster, paper flashing like a strobe. I couldn't look away. Each page now held my name, repeated hundreds of times, the lines getting smaller until they blurred into solid black. Something knocked from under the floor. Once. Twice. Then fingers, thin, gray, jointed wrong, pushed through the cracks between the boards, tapping rhythmically, impatiently. I grabbed the pen to throw it, but the moment my skin touched it, the fog inside the cabin surged, filling every corner. I felt a sharp pain in my palm. The pen had punctured my skin, ink bleeding directly into the cut. The room steadied, the fog retreated. Everything looked the same again, quiet, harmless, sunlight peeking through the curtains. The binder sat neatly on the table, dry and ordinary. The guest book was open to a fresh blank page. I touched the pen lying beside it. My name was still printed on the barrel, but the ink inside had turned faint, nearly empty. I should have run, but instead, I picked it up. Some part of me wanted to see what would happen next. I pressed the tip to the page, and before I could stop myself, I began to write the same welcome I'd seen before: welcome guests. When I lifted the pen, the ink was gone, and I wasn't breathing fog anymore. I was breathing dust. Outside, a car door slammed, footsteps crunched toward the porch. I smiled before I realized I was doing it. If you ever rent a cabin in the Appalachians and the house rules are written in pencil, don't add your name. Mine's already waiting in ink. People think surveying is clean work. GPS, tripods, numbers. Truth is, it's 90% mud, bugs, and people arguing about inches of dirt they'll never set foot on. I've mapped subdivisions, trailer lots, even the odd cemetery fence. But this job up on the ridge was different from the start. It came through the county office, marked Priority Dispute, Boundary Confirmation, Hollow Creek, Mayfield Ridge. A cabin sat dead center between two deeds. Both owners swore the line cut the other way. I was told to mark coordinates, flag corners, and don't get friendly. Fine by me. The access road turned to dirt 2 miles in. The air smelled like wet bark and old iron. My truck's tires spun on a patch of moss, and for a second I thought I'd slide right into the creek. The GPS chirped, "Waypoint 114 meters north." The cabin appeared out of fog like it had been waiting for me. 1-story, cedar shake roof, porch half collapsed. A rusted mailbox leaned against a fence post. No number, just a faint carved symbol, a circle with 3 short lines inside it like a child's drawing of a sun. I set up the tripod and level rod, logged coordinates, then walked the perimeter. The air had that quiet that's too deep for birds, just the hiss of wind through branches, slow and even, like breath. First measurement read fine, N35 degree 43.2111. But when I turned for the back line, the device glitched. Numbers rolled by themselves, blurring. Then it froze on a reading that made no sense, letters instead of digits. THERE. I blinked, hit reset, waited for the screen to clear. It jumped back to normal. Battery indicator full. I chalked it up to a bad signal. Happens in hollows all the time. The second corner was harder. The ground sloped, roots pushing through soil like ribs. My rangefinder kept pinging off invisible interference. On the third try, it locked onto something metallic under the ground about 30 feet out. Too small for a septic lid. Maybe a pipe cap. I made a note, drove a stake. Then I noticed the flag tape wasn't where I'd left it. The first corner flag, bright orange, should have been visible down the slope. Gone. I hiked back, expecting it to have come loose. Instead, I found the stake still there, but the flag had been pulled off, replaced with a strip of yellowed paper folded over the top. On it, in smudged pencil, was one word: move. I stood there a long time, listening for footsteps. The forest sounded empty. But the air had shifted, warmer, heavier, smelling faintly of sulfur, like the mountain had just exhaled through stone. I collected my equipment and drove back to town before dark. Logged the day as partial survey, incomplete. I figured I'd try again tomorrow with fresh batteries and a clear head. That night, as I reviewed the coordinates on my laptop, I noticed something off. The map lines didn't match up anymore. The points I'd marked had rearranged themselves into a perfect circle, dead center around the cabin. When I zoomed in, the circle formed a pattern, the same symbol from the mailbox. I closed the laptop, sat back, and listened to the hum of the motel fridge. My ears rang with that same mountain hush, even though I was miles away. The next morning, I planned to tell the county office the site was compromised. Bad terrain, unstable readings, but when I grabbed my survey gear, The GPS screen was already lit. No power button pressed, just one coordinate flashing over and over. 35°.3211N. Come back. The strangest part wasn't the message. It was that the device had no signal, no battery, and my reflection in the screen was smiling when I wasn't. I told myself I'd left the GPS on by accident. Maybe residual charge, maybe static interference. I've seen tools do weird things after a lightning storm, but when I pressed the power key and it stayed lit, bright, insistent, I felt something in my stomach twist. I should have handed it over to the office tech guys, should have written it off as faulty. But curiosity's a quiet drug. It talks to you in your own voice, says just one more reading, just to be sure. By noon, I was back on the ridge. The air felt different. Too still. The trees around the road leaned inward like they'd grown overnight. At the clearing, my orange survey stakes were gone again, replaced with smaller wooden pegs, freshly cut. Someone, or something, had redrawn the whole perimeter. The weirdest part? The new pegs lined up with perfect symmetry, not random, a neat, exact oval encircling the cabin. No human does that without a laser level. I walked the line, checking distances. Every point landed at a clean 40 meters apart, as if the Earth itself had drafted a blueprint. My GPS blinked and recalibrated automatically. The coordinates it displayed didn't match county data anymore, but the system didn't flag it as error. Instead, the corner markers spelled out new letters in the digital log, M-I-N-E. I dropped the receiver like it was hot metal. "You're glitching," I muttered, voice too loud in the quiet. The wind stirred then, brief and dry, bringing with it the smell of burned pine. Somewhere up the slope came a faint tapping, like metal on stone. Regular, deliberate. I followed it. The sound led me behind the cabin to a spot where the soil was darker. Something glittered, half buried in the dirt, a square of metal, maybe an old survey monument. I brushed away the soil and froze. It wasn't a monument. It was a brass nameplate bolted to rock, words nearly worn away. Property of the Boundary Commission, 1891. I'd seen a few antique markers before, but not this old, not up here. I leaned in closer. Below the English text were carved symbols, neat little triangles and half-moons arranged like an alphabet. I didn't recognize any of it. The tapping came again, closer this time, from under the rock. 3 quick beats, then silence. I backed off fast. The ground had a heartbeat feel, subtle vibrations through my boots, like something moving in deep soil. My phone buzzed in my pocket, nearly sending me over the edge of the hill. The screen showed a single message from an unknown number. Stop drawing lines. No bars. No service. I drove out faster than I should have, tires skidding on loose gravel. The GPS unit on the seat beside me wouldn't shut off, the screen filling with numbers that weren't coordinates, just repeating sequences of 43 and 211, my own data points, scrolling faster and faster until the whole display went blank. Back in town, I took it to the county office. My supervisor, a heavy guy named Lloyd, frowned at the unit. "Dead battery," he said. He pressed the power key. The screen stayed dark. "Leave it here. I'll have tech check it." I nodded and left, pretending to agree. But that night, as I checked my truck, the GPS was back on the passenger seat. It was glowing faintly, a dim green. No cables, no batteries. On the screen, the same coordinates blinked again, with one more line below them. Boundary, confirmed. Claim denied. Then, just beneath that, smaller text appeared and faded almost immediately. "You stood on the wrong side." I didn't realize how literal that message was until I saw tomorrow's assignment list. The county had replaced my name on the project log with Mayfield Ridge, owner of record. I stared at the spreadsheet on my office monitor until the words blurred. Owner of record, Mayfield Ridge. Under surveyor, my name was gone. Not deleted, reassigned. The file metadata showed the change timestamped at 2:17 a.m. hours before I even came to work. I turned off the monitor, shut the office door, and just sat in the dark a minute, trying to breathe. Logical explanations still lined up in my head. File corruption, prank, data merge. But behind those, something colder whispered that maybe the mountain had accepted my work, just not in the way I meant. By sunset, I was driving back. The road climbed in silence. No birds, no traffic, just the sound of tires on gravel and that low electrical hum my truck makes when it idles uphill. The forest had gone skeletal, branches interlocking overhead so tightly it felt like driving through ribs. When I reached the clearing, the cabin was gone. In its place, bare soil formed a perfect oval rimmed with my orange flagging tape, fluttering without wind. The ground in the center shimmered slightly, like heat rising from asphalt, though the air was cold enough to frost my breath. The GPS unit on the seat beside me turned itself on. I hadn't touched it. The screen glowed with one line of text. Final survey point, stand in center to confirm. I should have thrown it out the window, but my feet moved before my brain caught up. I stepped into the clearing, one cautious pace at a time. The soil underfoot was soft and warm, like compacted moss. The device beeped, a single sharp tone. The display flickered from numbers to letters again. HOME. Then, under the surface, something groaned, long and deep, like a door hinge the size of a valley. The ground trembled once. A fissure opened around the oval, a clean, symmetrical line encircling me. "Lloyd!" I shouted, though I knew he wasn't here. I just needed another voice. The only one that answered was the mountain itself, rumbling in vowels I didn't understand. I looked down at my boots. The soil was breathing. It rose and fell with slow rhythm, exhaling little clouds of dust. The pattern of the fissure wasn't random. It matched that old carved symbol on the brass plate, the circle with 3 short lines. The GPS beeped again. The display showed coordinates pulsing between 2 points, the original property lines. Only now the middle of the screen said, "Boundary erased." I backed up fast, tripping over one of the orange stakes. The ground shuddered. I swear I saw the hill itself flex, like the land was turning over in its sleep. I ran for the truck. When I yanked open the door, the GPS voice, a mechanical female monotone, spoke for the first time. "Survey complete. Thank you for returning." Then the screen went dark for good. The next thing I remember clearly is waking in my driveway with the engine cold and sunrise cutting through fog. My hands were coated in black soil that smelled faintly metallic, my boots caked in something sticky. At work, I tried to explain what happened. Lloyd looked at me like I'd lost it. "You didn't go back out there," he said. "You couldn't have. County closed that road last month. Mudslide wiped it clean off the map." He turned his monitor toward me. The official GIS site showed a new boundary overlay, an oval zone labeled Restricted Area, Geologic Shift, Unsafe. No owner listed, just a single word in the notes field, Uncharted. I quit the next day, but sometimes when I open my truck door in the dark, the GPS screen lights up for half a second. The coordinates flash 35°43.211 N before fading, and the map zooms in to show one word stamped across the terrain in faint gray letters: mine. Last week, county records mailed me a new property tax bill, addressed not to my home, but to Mayfield Ridge, boundary keeper. The coordinates listed: 35°43.3. Mine. You never really know how quiet the woods can get until the person you love whispers, "Do you hear that?" And there's nothing else. No birds, no wind, no hum of a fridge, just that sound, that soft, steady whistling. It started the first night. My girlfriend Sarah had found the cabin online, a week off grid, perfect for couples who need to disconnect. The photos showed rough-hewn beams, a potbelly stove, solar lights, and a tiny porch overlooking fog. Looked romantic. Cheap, too. By dusk, we were unpacked, laughing over how dark it got once the sun dropped. There were no power lines, no cell towers, just a small battery lantern and the stove. I lit kindling, the flames caught, and for a while, it was perfect. The stove's draft rattled once, then steadied into a low hum. That was the first time I heard it. Just faint at first. A wheeze through the stovepipe, like someone trying to breathe quietly. Sarah wrinkled her nose. "It's whistling." "Yeah," I said, tapping the flue. "Probably the wind." Except there wasn't any. Outside, the fog was still as milk. We ate canned chili, played cards, laughed about who'd snore first. The whistle grew higher, like it was following our voices. Whenever one of us spoke, it shifted pitch, matching our tone. Sarah called out, "Hello?" The whistle dropped 2 notes. "Hell, oh." I joked, "Guess it's flirting with you." But she didn't laugh. By midnight, the sound had changed. No longer steady, it came in bursts, 2 long, 1 short, like a tune that couldn't remember itself. I shut the stove's damper, thinking maybe the air draft was off. The whistle stopped immediately. We both exhaled, half embarrassed. Sarah blew out the lantern, and we settled into the cot's uneven mattress. The dark pressed close, deep as sleep itself. I woke later to a faint breath against my ear. Not a whistle now, a sigh. I rolled over. Sarah was sitting up, hair wild, eyes wide. "It's in the walls," she whispered. The sound had moved. It came from the seams between logs, thin and purposeful. I held up the lantern and saw a faint shiver ripple across the wood grain, like air moving behind it. I yanked the stove door open to make sure nothing was burning. Ashes cold, no glow. But from inside the pipe came another breath, sharp, fast, almost impatient. I shut the flue completely, stuffed a rag into the cap, and for good measure, shoved a dish towel into the seams where the pipe met the ceiling. The cabin fell silent. We laughed nervously, the way people do after a jump scare. I said, "See?" Wind pocket. Problem solved. We tried to sleep again. Sometime near dawn, a soft hiss woke me. The towel near the ceiling had fallen out. From behind the wall came a slow, wet inhale. Sarah grabbed my arm. "It's not the wind," she said. Before I could answer, the sound shifted. Lower now, raspier. Then, unmistakably, it tried to copy her voice. "Not the wind," it whispered, half breath, half laugh. We packed our bags in silence. I opened the door, but the fog outside had thickened until we couldn't see past the porch. The world had vanished into white. The whistle followed us, first from the walls, then the rafters, circling the room like something pacing above. I told Sarah to stay by the door while I checked the stove again. My hands trembled as I pulled the rag free. The pipe was cold, but a thin current of air brushed my knuckles from inside, pulling inward like the cabin was inhaling me. That was when Sarah whispered, "It's learning." The whistle cut off. For a heartbeat, there was real silence. Then, from the rafters above us, something answered. The same whistle, perfect pitch. Ours. When it whistled again, it wasn't through metal, it was from the dark corner of the room, and it said my name. At first, hearing your own name whispered in an empty room doesn't register as fear. It's recognition, like someone tugged a string tied to your ribs. But once your brain catches up, it curdles into something colder than panic. "Sarah," I said quietly, "grab the lantern." She already had it lit. The light trembled in her hands, painting the cabin gold and black. The corner where the sound came from looked ordinary, just stacked logs, a bent nail, the outline of an old window someone had sealed with plywood. "Hello?" I said again, stupidly. The whistle answered, not through the pipe, but right behind the wall, shaped like breath through teeth. "Hello!" Sarah backed up until she hit the door. "Let's go, please." I reached for the latch. It didn't move. The door didn't even rattle. The wood felt soft beneath my hand, as if it were pulsing. I yanked harder. The handle tore clean off in my grip. Something tapped inside the wall. 3 short beats, then a long, drawn-out inhale that made the logs creak. "We'll break a window," I said, trying to sound calm, but every window was boarded, thick planks nailed years ago. When I touched one, it felt warm. The whistle rose again, sharper now. It traced a little pattern in the air, 2 notes up, 1 down, like a question. I realized it was matching Sarah's breathing. Every time she gasped, it copied her rhythm. I pulled her close. "We'll wait for daylight. Just stay quiet." She nodded. We huddled near the stove, the only place that still felt solid. The pipe above us ticked faintly as it cooled, but no air moved through it anymore. We sat for what felt like hours, trying not to look at the walls. Then something knocked from inside the stove, 1 clear rap on the iron door. Sarah flinched. "Don't," she whispered. But the knock came again, louder. I lifted the latch with shaking fingers. Cold air spilled out, thick with that sweet, metallic smell wood smoke leaves behind. There was nothing inside, just darkness that seemed deeper than the small space should allow. Then, faintly, it breathed out. I slammed the door and backed away. "We seal it again," I said. "Tight. It can't breathe if we—" "Listen," Sarah interrupted. I froze. The whistle had stopped. The whole cabin had gone silent. Even our own breathing sounded too loud. Then, from under the floorboards, came a long, dragging exhale, slow, deliberate, almost relieved. The boards flexed under our feet. The whistle began again, low and wet, bubbling like something with water in its lungs. Sarah covered her ears. "It's inside," she said, crying now. "It's under us." I grabbed my toolbox and started nailing boards over the stove hatch, over the vents, every seam I could find. With each hammer strike, the sound shifted, moving through the cabin like water through pipes. When I sealed 1 corner, it popped up in another, through the rafters, then the floor, then the walls. By the time I drove the last nail, the whistle was behind the door again, inches from my back. It whispered, "Let me out." I turned. The planks of the door were swelling inward, bowing under invisible pressure. The nails I'd driven earlier squealed, heads twisting as if being pushed from the other side. Sarah grabbed my arm. "If it wants air, let it have the cabin." She ran for the lantern, splashed the fuel can we'd used for kindling. The smell of kerosene filled the air. "Sarah, wait." She struck a match. The flare lit her face, pale and terrified but sure. "When it breathes in again, it'll take the fire with it." She tossed the flame toward the stove. The air sucked inward all at once, roaring like a giant inhaling. Then the cabin exhaled. The blast blew us through the doorway, but in the fog outside, something was still whistling, faint and steady, as if it had finally learned to breathe on its own. When the blast hit, it wasn't the kind of explosion you see in movies. No orange fireball, no shattering windows. It was a pressure wave, a single pulse that knocked the air out of my lungs and folded the cabin inward like a paper bag. Then there was silence. I remember the taste of smoke and iron. The world spun in gray loops. I crawled through debris until my hands hit wet leaves instead of floorboards. The fog outside was thicker now, full of drifting ash that fell soft as snow. "Sarah!" I shouted. No answer. Only the faint, rhythmic sound of breathing somewhere behind the collapsed wall. I found her half buried near the porch steps, coughing but alive. Her face was streaked black, eyes wild and too bright. She pointed at the wreck of the cabin. "It's still moving." She was right. The ruins were pulsing, slow, shallow, like embers under a blanket. Chunks of timber shifted, sighing. The whistling returned, softer this time, filtering through the fog like a lullaby played backward. "We need to get down the ridge," I said. "Now." We stumbled toward the road, half blind. Every few steps the whistle followed us, weaving through the fog from different directions, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, like it couldn't decide which way to go. Halfway down the trail, Sarah stopped. "Do you smell that?" At first I didn't, then it hit. The same burnt sweet creosote smell from the stove, stronger now. My chest tightened. The fog itself smelled like it had lungs. Behind us, the rubble sighed one last time and the whistling stopped. We made it to the truck. My hands shook so badly I dropped the keys twice before jamming them into the ignition. The engine coughed, but caught. We drove downhill until the fog thinned and the sky turned pink with sunrise. Only when we reached the paved road did I look back. The ridge was burning, but not with flame, more like the mountain was exhaling light. Pale ribbons rose from the trees, twisting upward before fading into the morning sky. Sarah leaned against the window, whispering, "It's done." I wanted to believe her. 2 weeks later, back home, I still heard it. Not all the time, just faintly, in quiet rooms through vents or cracks in the wall. A soft whistle when I breathed too deeply. The insurance adjuster called it a propane explosion. The sheriff said the same. "Lucky you two walked away," he told me. Lucky. Sarah wouldn't talk about it. She started sleeping with earplugs, music blaring through headphones. One night I woke to find her standing at the stove in our apartment, door open, listening. "Do you hear it?" she asked. I didn't then, but later, when she left for a walk and never came back, I did. From the vent above the sink came a single slow breath, pulling inward like something tasting the air. I sealed the vent with tape, then plaster. I left the apartment, moved 3 states away, changed numbers, names, everything. Still, sometimes when it rains, I catch it again, the low, rising whistle that bends into a sigh. I've learned to live with it. I breathe shallow, talk less, keep the windows sealed. The news said a wildfire hit that same ridge last summer, burned straight through the valley, but stopped dead where the cabin used to stand. The firefighters said the smoke there moved funny, curling downward instead of up. Maybe Sarah made it stop. Maybe it followed her instead. I don't know anymore. But tonight, the winds died again. The air in my house feels heavy, full, waiting. The vent above the stove shivers once and then goes still. And somewhere in that stillness, a whistle starts, slow, patient, learning my breathing all over again. I've learned one trick she never did. If you hold your breath long enough, it pauses too, like it's listening, waiting for you to start again. I've been cleaning mountain rentals for 9 years. Nothing glamorous. Trash, linens, bleach, repeat. The pay's decent, the air's better than town, and you stop noticing how quiet it gets after a while. The cabin on Mill Branch Road was part of a newer account. 5 rentals owned by some investor from Florida. He never came up here himself, just sent polite texts through an app. Guest checkout 11 a.m., next check-in tomorrow. Standard routine. First couple of cleanings were normal enough. Dust, pine needles, a few mouse droppings. Then came the damp sheets. They weren't wet, just clammy, like somebody had laid them over a creek rock. At first, I figured the guests hadn't run the heater. Happens all the time. People don't understand how mountain humidity works. I tossed the bedding in my trunk and drove home. Next week, same cabin. Fresh towels hung, beds made tight, everything sealed. When I came back after the guests checked out, the master bedspread was damp again. Same smell. Not mildew, not sweat. Something colder, cleaner, like rainwater run through old stone. I checked for leaks. Ceiling, bone dry, roof, fine. Plumbing? The upstairs bathroom was just a half bath, no shower, and the water lines didn't even reach that corner. The stain on the pillowcase looked darker at the edges, like water had come up from inside the fabric. I told the owner. He texted back, "Probably condensation. Try a dehumidifier." So I brought one up. It filled halfway overnight, even though no one was staying there. I dumped it in the gravel drive, and the water had grit in it. Not dust, sand, creek sand, gray and fine as sugar. That got my attention. The cabin sits about 50 yards uphill from Mill Branch, a narrow stream that snakes down to the main road. I followed it on my brake, boots sinking in moss. The water ran clear, whispering under roots. Right below the cabin's porch, the stream widened into a dark pool. The smell rising off it hit me like wet metal, familiar from the linens. That's when I noticed something that shouldn't have been there. Bubbles. They rose from the pool in clusters of 3, perfectly spaced, like a slow heartbeat. Then the ground trembled under my boots. Not an earthquake, just a deep vibration, as if the creek were breathing through the soil. I backed away fast. Told myself it was trapped air, runoff, whatever. But when I looked up at the cabin, I could swear the boards under the windows flexed, swelling outward for a split second. I didn't tell the owner about that part. I finished my cleaning, left the dehumidifier running, locked up, and drove off. That night, around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. No name, just the cabin's address as a text header. The message said, "Return, you forgot the sheets." I hadn't. I never forget sheets. I keep them logged in a notebook, each cabin, each date. I checked the trunk anyway. The bag I'd dropped off that afternoon was missing. Morning came gray and wet. I drove back up. The front door stood open, key still hanging in the lock. Inside smelled wrong, cold, earthy, like the inside of a well. The bedspread was folded perfectly on the mattress, white and neat, but soaking wet. A dark drip trailed from the corner onto the floor. When I leaned close, the drop hit my shoe. It wasn't just water, it was warm. I followed the drip to the stairs and froze when I heard it upstairs again. The slow, patient sound of water seeping through wood as if something under the cabin had started breathing. I told myself it was plumbing, even though I knew better. The cabin's water line came in from the opposite wall, and there was no bathroom up here that could leak through the floorboards. Still, pretending it was something I could fix felt safer than thinking about the alternative. The upstairs landing smelled like a cellar, wet dirt and iron. I followed the sound. It wasn't dripping anymore, it was pulsing. A soft inhale-exhale rhythm, like water being drawn through a straw. The master bedroom door was half open. I pushed it the rest of the way and felt the floor dip under my boots. The boards looked dry, but they swelled and sank slightly, rippling as though the wood were floating on something beneath. The bed was made again. Same white sheets, same folded corners. A puddle spread from the center, perfectly round, soaking outward. I reached out, half hypnotized, and pressed my fingertips to the fabric. It was breathing. I jerked my hand back. Water clung to my skin, clear but smelling faintly metallic, like creek water in July. I stared as another bubble surfaced through the mattress, rising and bursting silently. Enough. I grabbed the linens, stuffed them into a garbage bag, and bolted downstairs. Every step I took, the floorboards creaked in slow, patient rhythm, as though the house was exhaling under my weight. At the door, I froze. The knob was slick. When I wiped it, my rag came away muddy. The air tasted thick, humid, the way it does right before a summer storm. Outside, the pool below the porch looked different, darker, bigger. The current had slowed to almost nothing, but the center rippled like something moving beneath the surface. I backed the truck up close, tossed the bag in the bed, and peeled out. I didn't stop until I hit cell range. I called the owner, voice shaking. "You've got a busted pipe or a spring under the foundation. The place is soaked. I'm done unless you send a plumber." He texted back 5 minutes later. "We don't use that cabin anymore, thought it was off the list." My gut went cold. You literally sent me a checkout notice, he replied. No guests booked since March. It was June. I checked the app history. The last 2 guest messages, the ones telling me to clean, had no user ID attached, just timestamps and a generic house icon. I tried to tell myself it was a glitch, some scheduling loop, but then my phone buzzed again. New message, same format. Next guest arrives tomorrow. Fresh linens required. The sender ID was just a single water drop emoji. That night, I couldn't sleep. My trailer smelled faintly of mud, though I'd never brought the damp bag inside. When I went out to check, the sheets were gone from the truck bed, just a wet outline where they'd sat. At dawn, I drove back to Mill Branch with every window down, convinced I'd find squatters. The creek glinted dull gray through the fog. The cabin's door hung open again. Inside, everything was dry, not just cleaned, dry like kiln wood, too dry, air brittle. But when I stepped on the floor, it gave a little under my boot, like a crust of ice over water. In the center of the room, the bed was remade. Sheets crisp, white, perfect. The pillowcases puffed like someone had just stood up. On the nightstand sat a folded cleaning checklist written in my handwriting. I hadn't written it. At the bottom was one line I'd never seen before. Rinse thoroughly after each guest. When I looked up, the wall behind the bed had darkened to the color of wet stone, and a faint trickle of creek water was seeping outward, spelling words as it ran. Stay clean. I should have run then. Any sane person would have. But I kept thinking like a cleaner. Finish the task, take the photo, clock out. The checklist was damp beneath my fingers, ink running like it had been written underwater. I folded it into my pocket, mostly so I wouldn't have to look at the way the water letters on the wall kept shifting. The air inside the cabin felt heavy, humid, almost warm against my skin. I could hear the creek below, but slower now, deeper, each splash stretched out like a breath. All right, I said to nobody. You win. I'll clean it. I went through the motions, stripped the bed, wiped the windows. Each rag I used came away dripping, though nothing looked wet. The mop bucket filled twice as fast as it should have. The water inside was clear at first, then turned the color of weak tea. When I leaned close, I could see fine sand swirling at the bottom. Every sound echoed too long, the squeak of the mop, my own breathing. The cabin was hollowing itself out. By the time I finished the bedroom, the water level in the bucket was rising on its own. I backed toward the stairs, and my boots splashed. The floorboards were sweating, moisture pushing up from below. The boards swelled, and a single bubble popped through between the seams. I yanked open the door to run, and froze. The creek had come up to the porch, not flooded exactly, risen. The pool below had widened until it lapped against the steps, clear water carrying pine needles and what looked like bits of fabric, my sheets drifting in slow circles. The water's surface trembled, then split in the middle. Something pale pressed upward from beneath, the size of a door. It wasn't a log. It had joints. I stumbled backward, kicking the bucket. The brown water spread across the floor, steaming. It smelled like rust and something older. The cabin exhaled. You could feel it, every wall flexing outward, every window fogging with breath. The sound of the creek and the house blended together, one slow inhale. Water surged from the cracks in the floor, clear and cold. It rose fast, swallowing my ankles, then my knees. I tried for the door again, but the knob was gone, just slick, swollen wood. The water was climbing, pulling at me like a tide. I dropped my mop and slammed at the boards with both hands. They gave, soft as skin. Beneath the thin layer of pine, something moved, liquid muscle shifting, adjusting to my touch. The water around me shivered, and I heard a sound like whispering under the current. It took me a second to realize it wasn't words. It was breathing. The cabin wasn't flooding, it was inhaling. I kicked free, scrambling up the stairs, but water poured from the ceiling now, flowing down in sheets. The upstairs floor was buckling, pushing downward, boards bending toward me. My cleaning rags floated past in slow circles, soaked through and turning gray. The checklist slid from my pocket, unrolling itself mid-current. The last line had changed again. In bold, wet letters, rinse, repeat. When the water reached my chest, it stopped rising. The walls were shaking, pulsing. The sound of the creek outside matched the rhythm in my ribs. I realized dimly that it wasn't trying to drown me. It was washing me. I took one last breath before the water sealed over my head. It was warm, tasted like stone. Somewhere above, sunlight flickered through ripples. Then nothing. They found my truck 3 days later, door open, keys in the ignition. The cabin? Still standing. Dry inside. Cleaner than it had ever been. Guests keep booking it, or so I've heard. The owner says the linens are always fresh, folded perfectly, damp to the touch, but never musty. Smells like creek water, he tells people. Authentic mountain air. He doesn't know that when you lean close, you can still hear the slow, steady sound of it breathing. If you ever wake up in a rental with sheets that smell like rain and stone, don't try to dry them. They're already waiting to wash you. Folks around here talk plenty about the Lord, but less about the places he don't visit anymore. Company Hollow is one of those. It's not on any map, just a dip between two ridges where the road gives up and the trees lean too close together. If you're from town, you won't even notice it, but if you were born here like me, you know to keep your eyes straight ahead when you pass the turnoff. I grew up hearing the older women at First Baptist whisper about it during potlucks, never directly, always sideways. That old cabin still standing? Mercy, they should have torn it down after the birthing stopped. I'd ask what birthing they meant, and my grandmother would pinch my wrist under the table, hard enough to leave a mark. Some doors stay closed for a reason, she'd say. She was a deacon's wife, tough as hickory, sharp as vinegar. She died when I was 27, and on her deathbed she called me close, breath sour with morphine. If you hear counting from the trees, she whispered, don't answer back. That was all. No explanation. The funeral was plain, closed casket, gospel choir, pot roast in the fellowship hall. After everyone left, I drove up to Company Hollow because that's what people do when they don't believe in old rules. We go check for ourselves. The road turned from gravel to dirt to nothing. A hand-painted sign nailed to a post said, "Private property, keep out." The paint had run, like tears. The hollow opened beneath me, steep and green, the smell of fern and creek rot thick in the air. At the bottom sat the cabin. I'd expected a ruin, but it wasn't. The roof sagged, sure, but the chimney stood straight, and someone had swept the porch clear of leaves. There were footprints in the mud, small ones, barefoot. I called out, just habit, the way you do when you're not sure you're trespassing. Hello? Anyone home? Nothing, just wind sliding through trees like a sigh. The door was shut but not locked. I pushed it open. Inside was one big room, a stone hearth, a cot, a wooden table, and the smell of old blood and lavender. The walls were dark with age, carved in places with names, dozens of them, all women's, Clara, June, Martha Jo, Ruth, and below them, dates, always in pairs. Birth and death? Maybe. Except the second date was always the same month as the first. I felt the air move then, a slow draft from the hearth. Not wind exactly, more like someone breathing low and careful. I crouched, shining my phone light up the chimney. Black brick. Nothing else. But when I turned away, the light flickered like something had passed in front of it. That's when I heard it. Soft, high and close, the sound of someone counting. 1, 2. I froze. The voice was young, maybe a girl's. It came from outside, behind the cabin. I told myself it was wind playing tricks, that same old whisper through leaves. But the count went on, slow and steady. 3, 4, 5. I backed toward the door, but the floor creaked, and the voice stopped. Silence pressed so hard against my ears, I thought I'd gone deaf. Then faintly, "You're not supposed to answer." I spun around. No one there. Just a faint footprint in the dust beside mine. Small, bare, fresh. The phone in my hand buzzed, a text from an unknown number time-stamped a minute ago. 6. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor face down. And when I picked it up again, the screen showed my reflection. Only my mouth was moving, counting under its breath. I didn't realize I was whispering the numbers out loud until the cabin's door eased shut behind me and a second voice started counting with mine, from inside the hearth. When I heard the second voice join mine, I stopped counting so fast I bit my tongue. Blood pooled sharp and coppery in my mouth. The whisper from inside the hearth went on without me. 7, 8, 9. The voice wasn't a child's anymore. It had an echo to it, like a woman speaking into a clay jar. I backed away until my shoulders hit the door. It didn't give. The latch hadn't clicked, but the wood felt fused. "Hello?" I called. "Who's there?" Silence. Then one more number, barely a breath. 10. I don't scare easy. I've worked graveyards, been snowed in alone, chased off drunks with a shovel. But something about hearing numbers where there shouldn't be any makes your bones remember old warnings. I bolted for the window. It was boarded from the outside, planks nailed so cleanly you'd think someone meant to keep things in. "Okay," I said aloud, because words felt like anchors. "I'm leaving now." That's when I saw the photographs. They hung crooked over the cot, black and white portraits of women, church dresses, stiff collars, eyes sharp as pins. Some looked barely 16. Each face had a faint burn mark over the mouth, like someone had pressed an ember there. Below each picture, names carved in wood matched the ones on the wall. The last name was my grandmother's. She looked younger than I'd ever seen her. Same eyes, though, same wary stare. Under her name, a second date, 30 years after the first. That couldn't be right. I heard footsteps outside then, slow, deliberate, bare feet on wet leaves. A woman's voice called through the door, low and sing-song. "Counting's done now, child. You can come out." I froze. My grandmother's voice. It wasn't possible. "Grandma? Come on out," she said again, tone too calm, too patient. "You started it. You know the rules." Something shifted in the hearth behind me. Ash stirred like breath. I didn't turn to look. "You're dead," I said, whispering. "You died last spring." The door creaked, just a little, the wood sighing like it was breathing with me. Her voice slipped through the crack, softer now. "Only for a season. Someone's got to keep count. We all take turns." The smell of lavender flooded the cabin, stronger than any perfume. Beneath it, a faint metallic tang, the same I'd smelled at her funeral when the casket was closed too soon. I took a step toward the door. It opened on its own, slow as a heartbeat. Outside, the hollow was thick with fog. I could make out shapes moving among the trees, women in simple dresses, hair pinned, hands clasped. They were humming something tuneless, a sound halfway between prayer and sigh. Grandma stood at the front of them. She smiled, but her teeth were gray, her eyes the color of creek water. "You shouldn't have come alone," she said. "We already lost count." Behind me, the hearth groaned. A warm wind pushed out, carrying soot that curled around my legs. Grandma stretched out her hand. "Come take your place. You know the pattern." "You always did." The fog thinned enough for me to see the others clearly now, each one bearing the same burn mark across her mouth. They stood in a half circle, leaving one empty spot. For me. I backed into the cabin, slamming the door. The latch caught this time, though I hadn't touched it. From outside came their voices, counting again. 1, 2, 3. Each number made the floor vibrate under my feet, a slow, deep rhythm, like a heartbeat in the wood. Then, from the hearth, a whisper finished the sequence for them. 4. When I looked down, a smear of soot on my wrist formed the number 5, and the counting started over, this time in my grandmother's voice, coming from inside my chest. It took me a few seconds to understand what I was hearing. The counting wasn't just in my head, it was vibrating through me, each number like a heartbeat that didn't belong to my own body. 5, my grandmother's voice whispered from somewhere under my ribs. 6. I clutched my chest and stumbled toward the door, but the wood burned cold under my palm. Outside, the fog had thickened again, pressing against the windows until everything beyond them vanished. The air inside the cabin smelled like candle wax and iron, the same as the church basement during funerals. "Stop it!" I yelled. "You're dead, all of you!" The counting paused. Then a dozen voices spoke together, soft, patient, each carrying that old mountain drawl. "No, child, we're remembered." The hearth exhaled a gust of soot and heat. I backed away as the smoke rolled upward, forming a shape, a woman's silhouette, tall and hollow-eyed, her mouth flickering with light like an open flame. When she spoke, it was in the voice of all the women I'd ever heard whisper about this place. "The mountain don't keep time," she said. "We do. We keep the birthing and the burying. We keep the count." My hand brushed the wall, the one carved with names. My grandmother's name pulsed faintly in the lamplight, letters glowing like embers. Under it, a line of fresh carvings spread, names I didn't recognize yet, unfinished. The last one started with my initials. I ran to the door again, pounding until my fists ached. "Let me out!" From the other side came a low, familiar hum, the sound of those women praying without words. The fog beyond the window shifted like a slow tide, and through it I saw their outlines circling the cabin. 1, 2, 3 turns around, hands joined. Inside, the counting began again, picking up where it left off. 7, 8. I could feel the vibration rising through the floorboards, pulsing in my throat, making it hard to breathe. I grabbed my phone, desperate for light, a voice, anything. The screen glowed once, flickered, then filled with a single line of text. 9. Say 10. I dropped it like it was hot. "No," I whispered. "I'm not finishing it." The voices outside stuttered, unsure. The shape in the hearth leaned forward, smoke spilling from the cracks between the stones. Its eyes glowed like coal, its mouth opening wider, stretching impossibly long. "You will," it said. "Someone always does." The cabin shook. Dust rained from the rafters. I stumbled backward, hit the cot, and felt something underneath the mattress, soft, round, the size of a child's skull. My stomach turned. I yanked the blanket back, and beneath it lay another carving in the wood, 10. The air went still. The fog outside stopped moving. The women's humming ceased. Even the heartbeat under my ribs quieted. Then the hearth drew in one long breath. The cabin lights dimmed as if it were swallowing the air itself. The fire inside the stone mouth flared, then died, leaving only ash, and in that ash, 10 small footprints leading out of the chimney. The door swung open by itself. Cold wind tore through the room. The fog poured in, thick as wool. When it cleared, the women were gone. The only thing left was the echo of their last word, counted. I stumbled down the path toward town, half blind from the smoke, my chest aching where the numbers had pulsed. By the time I reached the main road, dawn was breaking. The church bell rang 10 times, though it wasn't Sunday. Back home, I showered twice, burned my clothes, said nothing. But that night, lying in bed, I heard the faint sound of someone counting outside my window. 1. It was a young girl's voice this time. 2. I tried not to listen, tried to stay still, But when I rolled over, my reflection in the window mouthed the next number before I could stop it. 3. Somewhere in Company Hollow, a new name's been carved beneath my grandmother's, and every night the counting starts one number higher. Storm cleanup's the part of the job they never show in the training videos. You spend 16 hours in cold rain, half the county screaming about their freezers thawing, and all you can do is trace deadlines through mud. That week's ice storm hit harder than anyone expected. Every ridge was glazed in glass, trees snapped, poles leaned like drunks, and every few minutes you'd hear a limb explode under the weight. My truck radio crackled with the usual chatter: outage reports, coordinates, tired jokes. Then dispatch called, "Unit 14, we've got an isolated light burning on an unpowered line, Harrison Ridge sector." I blinked. Unpowered? Affirmative. Meter's dead, breaker tripped, yet someone's porch light is still drawing current. Go check it, kill the feed if you can. I'd seen crossfeeds before, people wiring generators wrong, backfeeding into the grid, but something in the dispatcher's tone made me uneasy. The road up Harrison Ridge was a narrow snake of ice and fallen limbs. The higher I climbed, the quieter it got. My tires crunched, the only sound for miles. At the top, the whole valley below was dark, no porch lamps, no glow from windows. Only one point of light shone through the trees, a steady amber bulb burning against the storm. The cabin sat crooked on a bluff, half buried in snow. A single porch light glowed above the door, bright and constant. The meter on the pole was dead, its display blank. The main line feeding the cabin had snapped clean 50 yards down. I radioed dispatch. "Line 7's cold, but that lamp's live. Copy?" "Copy, 14. Confirm no generator running?" "No noise, no exhaust, no nothing. It's just on." Static filled the channel. I caught half a sentence before the signal dropped, something about pattern logs. I climbed the porch, boots squeaking on ice. The bulb above hummed faintly, not like electricity, more like a throat clearing. I pulled my multimeter and held the probe to the fixture. The needle jumped. Voltage, but wrong. 91 volts, alternating irregularly, like a heartbeat. The bulb flickered once, then again. 3 quick flashes, a pause, too long. It took me a second to realize it wasn't random. Morse code. I hadn't used it since the army, but I remembered enough to spell the letters. H-I. I laughed under my breath. "Cute trick," I said. "Somebody's playing games." Still, I jotted it down. When I looked up again, the bulb blinked faster. Another set. N-I-C-K, my name. The light steadied. I stared at it, skin prickling despite the cold. "Who's there?" The cabin answered with a low electrical hum, the kind old transformers make before they blow. My truck radio hissed, then a voice came through, mine. "Unit 14, we've got an isolated light burning." It repeated exactly what I'd said 5 minutes earlier, word for word. The bulb flickered again, now in long, deliberate bursts. I started writing the sequence, hand shaking. It spelled L-O-O-K. I turned toward the yard. All the downed lines, 3 of them, were glowing faintly under the snow, like veins lit from inside. The current was moving uphill, not down, feeding into the house. I drew my knife, scraped away the snow to check the cable. No heat, no spark. But the ground below pulsed with light for a moment, faint but alive, like something under the soil was breathing power in and out. The porch bulb dimmed, then steadied again. I stepped back, tripping on the icy step. My radio buzzed once more. "Unit 14, confirm your heart rate." I froze. "What?" No reply. The porch light blinked once, then twice, perfectly timed to the pounding in my chest. I killed my radio, but the bulb kept pulsing anyway, slowing, sinking, until I realized the light was breathing with me. I stood there watching that amber bulb pulse like it knew me. It wasn't random. It was steady, timed, perfect. 2 blinks, pause, 2 more, a mimic. My first thought was adrenaline messing with my head. My second was worse. If this line wasn't connected to the grid, then something else was powering it. I took a slow breath. The light dimmed exactly as I exhaled, then flared when I breathed in. I held my breath. The light froze. Jesus Christ, I muttered, stepping back. When I exhaled again, it brightened. One soft flare, like relief. I fumbled for my radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 14. Something's, wrong with this feed. The fixture's responding to electrical field changes, maybe to me. Request backup. Static. Just static. Then my own voice came through the speaker again, warped and slow. Backup. Denied. I dropped the handset. It hissed and popped, the sound like breathing through wires. The porch bulb glowed steady now, watching me, or at least it felt that way. I needed to see where it was drawing power. I followed the service line back to the pole. The main fuse cutout hung open, wire burned black. No current should have been passing through, but the ground below the pole was warm, melting the snow in a perfect circle. I knelt, swept my glove through the slush. Beneath it, the soil shimmered faintly blue. I touched the dirt. It tingled, not from heat, but vibration, a slow rhythm, pulse for pulse, in sync with my own. I yanked my hand back and wiped it on my coat, heart hammering. The glow beneath the ground faded as if embarrassed to be caught. Back at the cabin, the porch light started blinking again. Longer messages this time. I wrote them down in my notebook, translating as best I could. Nick downstairs. I froze. There was no downstairs. The foundation was concrete slab, no crawl space, no basement. Still, the message repeated, slower now. Downstairs. I told myself it had to be coincidence. Voltage surges could make lights flicker in patterns. My brain just wanted to see words, but my truck's headlights dimmed then, matching the same beat as the porch light, an alternating current looping between us. I couldn't leave. Something in that pulse tugged at me, magnetic, pulling behind the sternum. Against my better sense, I climbed the steps again. The light hummed louder, brighter. Inside, the door stood unlocked. I hesitated, then pushed it open. The smell hit first, ozone and damp wood, like air after lightning. My flashlight beam caught bare walls, overturned furniture, and water pooling across the floor. Each puddle mirrored the porch light outside, faint amber ripples glowing across the surface. I followed the sound of dripping to the back room. There was a hatch there, flush with the floorboards. Not a full basement hatch, just a square panel with rusted hinges. I knelt, fingers trembling, and lifted it. Underneath wasn't dirt or crawl space, it was light. A low hum rose up from the opening, the same frequency as the bulb. The air was charged, prickling every hair on my arms. I leaned closer and saw the reflection of my own face staring back from the light below, eyes black, mouth open like it was whispering. The porch lamp blinked outside, urgent now. "Come in!" I slammed the hatch shut, heart pounding. The hum deepened, shaking dust from the rafters. My flashlight flickered, then died. In the dark, the only light came from below the floorboards, soft amber, pulsing in rhythm with my chest again. I stumbled toward the door. The knob shocked me, a static bite that jumped up my arm and stopped my heart for half a beat. I gasped, and the light outside dimmed with me. When it flared back, so did my pulse. The bulb wasn't copying me anymore. It was controlling me, each blink dragging my heartbeat slower, steadier, until I realized it wasn't a light at all. It was something alive trying to keep me on its circuit. The hum inside the cabin grew until I could feel it under my skin, like standing too close to a live transformer. Every breath I took made the light flicker. Every flicker made my heart misfire. It was syncing me up, rewiring something inside. I tried to move, but my muscles lagged, delayed by half a second, as if my body were answering to another current. The hatch at my feet pulsed brighter with each heartbeat. I forced myself toward the door again. "You're just tired," I told myself out loud. "Storm fatigue. Electric stress hallucination." The bulb outside blinked once, then twice. No. My flashlight sputtered back to life on its own, thin and pale. The beam caught the far wall, black burn marks spreading outward like veins. In the center of them, nailed through the boards, was a faded metal tag, "Property of Harrison Power Authority, Inspection, 1979. Under it, a signature in grease pencil, N.W. Carter. My full name, my handwriting. I stepped closer, stomach twisting. I'd never been up here before this week, but the signature looked fresh, grease still tacky. The bulb outside blinked again. "Hello, Nick." I backed away, tripped over the hatch, and hit the floor hard. The wood under me was hot now, humming with that same pulse. The vibration climbed through my spine, settling behind my eyes. A pressure built, like static before a strike. Then I saw it. The light bleeding from the seams of the floor wasn't amber anymore. It was red, dull and slow, pulsing in rhythm with the veins on my wrist. Each throb hurt. My pulse wasn't mine anymore, it was the cabin's. I crawled toward the hatch. My hand landed on the latch just as the hum shifted into a sound, a deep, drawn-out word shaped by current. "Stay." I flipped the hatch anyway. Light burst out, blinding, searing through the fog that filled the room. Inside there was no basement, only coils of copper wire twisting through earth like roots. They moved, flexed. Each wire ended in a bulb socket filled not with glass, but with eyes. Human eyes, open and turning, faintly glowing. When I screamed, the sound came back through the radio, clipped to my shoulder. "Unit 14, my own voice said. "Copy. Power restored." Then the hum cut out. Everything went dark. For a second, the silence felt clean. Then the porch bulb outside came alive again, steady this time, burning brighter than ever. I grabbed my bag and bolted. The snow outside steamed as I ran. My truck headlights flickered in time with the porch light, like a pulse chasing me down the drive. The radio hissed again. "Dispatch to Unit 14, a new voice said, female, calm. "Confirmed restoration on Harrison Ridge. You can close your ticket." I didn't answer. Halfway down the road, the lights on my dashboard blinked. 3 long, 2 short, 3 long. SOS. Then everything died. The truck coasted to a stop. I sat there in the dark, breathing hard. After a minute, the porch light appeared again in the rearview mirror, still shining, even through the trees. I got out, walked to the road's edge, and looked back. The entire valley was still black, but the line of power poles leading up to the ridge glowed faintly, one by one, until they traced a single path straight to me. My chest hurt, a steady rhythm, matching the blinks. When I pressed 2 fingers to my neck, I felt the same pattern in my pulse. 3 long, 2 short, 3 long. A distress signal. Only I wasn't sending it. I turned off the truck lights, held my breath, and the glow from the ridge dimmed in perfect sync. When I exhaled, the bulb at the top flared bright again, welcoming, almost grateful. I think it wanted to keep me connected. So I drove away without looking back. That was a month ago. The storm's long gone, the grid's fixed. But every night at exactly 11:14 p.m., my house lights dim and then flicker 3 long, 2 short, 3 long. Sometimes when the power cuts out, I can still see that same porch light burning far off in the hills, steady, patient, waiting for me to breathe again. Caretaker work sounds peaceful until you've done it a few winters. The silence doesn't soothe. It hums, like pressure behind your eyes. You start noticing how long it's been since you heard a human voice. I'd been watching over 6 rental cabins that season, tucked high in a bend of the Blue Ridge. The owners lived down in Atlanta and only came up in summer. My job was simple: keep the pipes from freezing, restock the pantry, and make sure everything looked ready for guests. The problem was, no guests ever came. Still, I did what the list said. Every Monday, I'd drop a box of canned soup, coffee, and shelf bread into each cabin's kitchen. Every Friday, I'd check again. Half the food gone. I told myself it was raccoons or drifters. There were no tracks, though, not even in snow. After a few weeks, I started keeping a log. I'd write the date, what I left, and what went missing. Cabin 1, soup, 2 cans gone. Cabin 4, coffee tin half empty. Always small things. Never furniture moved or windows open. Just enough to make me doubt my own count. One night in January, a storm rolled through hard enough to knock the radio out. I holed up in the caretaker's shed and burned through my emergency whiskey. The wind made the trees creak like old doors. When it finally passed, I decided to do rounds early, just to clear my head. Cabin 3's porch light was on. I knew it shouldn't be. Power breakers stayed off all winter unless I flipped them for maintenance. But there it was, shining warm and steady. Inside, everything looked tidy. Cans lined the counter. The bed was made. I almost laughed. Maybe the owners had sent someone without telling me. Then I noticed something new on the kitchen table. A piece of paper, folded once, written in block letters. "Thank you for the food. Please leave more coffee." No name, no signature. I left the note where it was, checked the locks, and went back to the shed. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind had stopped, but the forest still made noise. Soft tapping against the windows, steady, polite. By morning, I'd convinced myself someone had hiked in. Maybe a hunter using the cabins for shelter. I told myself I'd leave another box and watch from a distance. Next evening, I stalked cabin 3 again and waited on the ridge with binoculars. The light came on right after dusk. No generator hum, no visible power source, just illumination, like the lamp wanted to be useful. Through the window, I saw movement. Not a figure exactly, more like a shadow shifting on its own, pacing slow. I blinked, and it was gone. The next morning, another note sat on the table. Good coffee. Cold night, stay near fire next time. That line stopped me. It sounded concerned, almost familiar. I checked my handwriting log when I got back to the shed. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. And that's when I saw it. The same blocky print, same spacing. I hadn't noticed before because I always printed in a hurry, but the A's had the same flat top. I went to the mirror in the bathroom and wrote the words again. Thank you for the food. The letters matched perfectly. That night, I dumped all my coffee in the sink. I stayed awake until dawn, listening. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps outside, barefoot, slow, crunching snow. Then a gentle knock on the door. When I didn't move, a folded piece of paper slid under the threshold. Check cabin 4. I left you something. By the time I reached cabin 4, the porch light was already on, and inside, every note I'd ever written hung neatly on the walls like wallpaper, all signed in my own hand. The morning air bit hard enough to sting, but I barely felt it. I'd driven up to cabin 4 before sunrise, headlights cutting through mist. The porch light was still burning, warm, steady, too bright against the pale snow. I hadn't turned it on. When I stepped inside, my breath caught. Every wall was covered in notes, hundreds of them. Some tacked up neatly, others pasted over one another until they looked like peeling wallpaper. My own handwriting everywhere, thick pencil, ballpoint pen, even marker, different dates scrawled at the corners. 12:03, need more sugar. 12:10, you shouldn't stay alone so long. 12:24, the storm's coming again. 1:02, don't look outside after dark. I ran my fingers over the closest sheet. It was damp, edges curling, the ink half bled. My chest tightened. Someone's copying me, I muttered. Someone's screwing with me. The floor creaked in answer, one slow step overhead. I froze. The cabin didn't have a second story. The noise came again, directly above, followed by a faint, dragging sound. Then a soft thump, like something heavy shifting its weight on beams that shouldn't exist. "Hello?" My voice sounded small in the wood and paper air. "Anyone up there?" Silence. I checked the attic hatch in the ceiling. The chain hung loose, dust unmoved. No footprints on the floor except mine, but the light fixture swayed slightly, as if something unseen had brushed past. I backed toward the door, telling myself to leave, to call the sheriff, to burn the place if I had to. That's when I noticed one note pinned higher than the rest. Fresh ink, centered perfectly above the mantel. "I left you something in the cupboard. You'll need it tonight." The paper was warm under my fingertips, like it had just come off a printer. Against my better judgment, I opened the cupboard. Inside sat an old metal thermos, one of mine. My initials, ND, scratched into the cap. I didn't remember leaving it there. When I unscrewed the lid, coffee steam drifted out, rich and dark. It smelled exactly how I liked it. I touched it to make sure it was real. The warmth buzzed through my palm, more electric than thermal. Something behind me whispered, "You're welcome." The voice was mine. I spun. No one there. Only the notes rustling as a breeze moved through them, like paper breathing. The smell of coffee deepened, sharp and metallic now, almost like blood. I dropped the thermos. The lid popped free, and the contents spilled across the floor. Thick, dark liquid that soaked into the wood but didn't spread. It pooled in a perfect circle, as if absorbed on command. Every note around the room fluttered once, all at the same time. The air filled with a faint scratching sound, the sound of pencils moving. New words were appearing, wet and black. "Look up." I tilted my head. The ceiling was covered too, fresh pages glistening with ink that dripped down like rain. Each note bore the same message, repeated over and over in my own handwriting. "You're doing good. Keep feeding us." Something shifted above the paper skin of the ceiling, heavy and wet, pressing down just enough to make dust fall. I bolted outside, gasping in the cold. The porch light flickered twice and steadied again. For a heartbeat, its glow outlined a figure standing in the window, me or something close. Back in the shed, I locked the door, burned my old notes in the stove, and poured bleach over the floors. I told myself that'd be the end of it. But at dusk, when the wind changed, I saw Cabin 4's porch light blink on again. A new note had been slid under my door. "Good work today. See you tomorrow." I turned it over with trembling hands, and on the back, written in my own block letters, was something I hadn't written yet. "Don't forget the coffee." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those notes breathing on the walls, my handwriting writhing, shifting, rewriting itself. By morning, I'd made up my mind to quit. I'd drive down to town, hand in the keys, and never look back. But when I opened the shed door, my truck was gone. Just gone. Fresh tire tracks led toward the cabins, clean and deep in the snow. I hadn't driven it there. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the tracks, boots crunching. The wind had died. Everything was still. The farther I walked, the more the forest smelled like burnt paper. The trail ended at Cabin 3. The porch light burned there now, same soft yellow glow that used to mean welcome. Through the frosted window I saw movement, someone pacing slow, careful, as though counting steps. My first thought was intruder. My second was worse. What if it was me again? I stepped inside. Every note from Cabin 4 had been moved here, covering the walls again. But now the paper looked old, edges brittle, handwriting faded. Some sheets dated decades earlier, 1981, 1994, 2007. Different pens, same style, mine. And on the table sat another thermos, steaming gently. Beside it lay a single sheet of fresh paper. "Welcome back, caretaker. We're hungry." My flashlight flickered, beam stuttering. The air felt heavy, like the whole room was holding its breath. I lifted the thermos. It was warm. Too warm. When I unscrewed the lid, it didn't smell like coffee this time. It smelled like old rainwater and iron. Something inside it moved. I dropped it, and dark liquid spilled across the floorboards. The moment it touched wood, the notes on the walls began to darken, letters rising up like embossed veins. The paper seemed to inhale, crinkling inward. Then came the sound. Not a voice exactly. More like thousands of pencil tips scratching in unison. New words appeared, scrawled across the nearest wall. Feed us the hand that writes. I stumbled back, but the boards flexed under my feet. The ink that had soaked into the floor in cabin 4 was here now, slick and shifting beneath the wood grain. My reflection wavered in it, eyes sunken, hands black up to the wrists, like I'd been writing in tar. I ran for the door, but it slammed before I reached it. The notes began peeling themselves off the walls, fluttering through the air like moths. They stuck to my jacket, my arms, my face. Everyone whispered something different, small thank yous, fragments of prayers, sighs of relief. Then, through the noise, one voice rose above the rest. Mine. Don't fight it, it said. You started this, you keep them fed. I ripped the pages off, one by one. But wherever they touched skin, they left pale rectangular marks, like paper burns. The floor trembled. The thermos rolled toward me, bumping my boot. Steam still leaked from its open mouth. Inside, floating just beneath the surface, was a pen. My pen. I don't remember picking it up. One moment my hands were empty, the next I was kneeling, scribbling on the floorboards. Words poured out without thought. Names, dates, grocery lists, confessions. Every line I wrote soaked instantly into the wood, and the humming eased, like something being fed. When I stopped, the pen was gone. My hand was shaking so hard it barely felt like mine. The room was silent again. I stepped outside at dawn. The valley below glowed faintly orange, each cabin lit, one after another, porch bulbs burning in perfect unison. In the snow between them were tire tracks, fresh, leading toward the highway. My truck sat there, engine idling, driver's door open. On the seat lay a stack of blank notepads and a message written across the dashboard in thick black marker. You're doing good. Keep feeding them. I got in. I don't remember turning the key, but the engine purred like it knew me. Now, every week, I make my rounds again, restock the shelves, leave the food, and check the notes. They're never quite where I left them, but they always say the same thing in the same handwriting. Mine. I used to think I was the caretaker. Now I understand. I'm just one of the cabins, writing itself full every night so the next one won't go hungry. Wildlife conservation sounds more glamorous than it is. 90% of the job is paperwork. The other 10 is chasing off drunk campers who think no trespassing means don't get caught. That's how I ended up setting trail cams near the old McReady cabin. It wasn't on any map, but locals knew it. Half collapsed, roof full of holes, floor soft from rot. We'd had reports of poachers gutting deer there and leaving the remains. My supervisor told me, get pictures, log plates, and stay out after dark. The ridge road was half frozen, sun cutting through thin fog when I parked. The cabin sat 20 yards off the trail, slumped into itself, shingles curling like dead leaves. It didn't feel haunted, just forgotten. I strapped the first trail cam to a pine facing the porch, then another on a tree line overlooking the roof. Checked angles, adjusted focus. I've done this 100 times. My hands know the steps better than my head. Back at the ranger station, I logged the coordinates, uploaded footage, and left it running overnight. The next morning, I opened the files expecting raccoons. Instead, I saw me. At least, it looked like me. Same uniform, same red parka, same gait. The figure walked into frame around 2:18 a.m., flashlight in hand, moving with purpose. It climbed the porch steps, looked right at the camera, then disappeared into the cabin. 10 minutes later, it came back carrying a hammer and a sheet of plywood. It leaned the wood against the roof and started hammering. I froze the frame. My stomach turned cold. I hadn't been there. My truck's GPS tracker confirmed it. I'd clocked out at 6:42 p.m. Slept at home, alone. I rewatched the footage, every frame. The man in the video didn't just look like me, he moved like me. Same nervous habit of adjusting the collar, same little hitch in my left knee from last winter's fall. The next morning, I hiked back up to check for footprints. Snow had fallen overnight, maybe an inch. Fresh tracks led from the tree line to the porch, my boot size, same tread pattern, same heel wear. Inside, the cabin looked different. Someone had swept the floor. The broken chair near the fireplace was gone. The air smelled faintly of sawdust and pine tar. And the roof. The section I'd seen in the footage had been patched. Not perfectly, but neat. Nails flush, edges sealed with tar like it had been done days ago. I touched the wood. It was dry. Back at the station, I told my supervisor. He laughed, said, "You've been up too many nights." Probably one of the old-timers fixing his hunting blind. I didn't argue, but that night I checked the next batch of footage. At 1:42 a.m., the same man appeared again. This time, he carried a bucket and brush, painting the front door. The camera caught his face clearly when he looked up, my face slack and calm, eyes unfocused like he was sleepwalking. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. His name tag gleamed in the light. Ranger M. Dunlap, my name. I checked my hands. The knuckles were raw, as if from swinging a hammer. I hadn't noticed that morning. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I left the cameras running again, this time adding one more facing my truck, just to prove where I'd really been. That night, I barely slept. My dreams were full of hammering sounds echoing through trees, rhythmic and patient. When I woke, my wrists ached, and there was pine dust under my fingernails. I checked the footage at dawn. The camera by my truck showed me leaving at 12:46 a.m., flashlight in hand. I hadn't moved all night. Hook. The worst part wasn't seeing myself on camera. It was watching me wave goodbye before heading toward the cabin, like he knew I'd be watching. I watched that clip over and over, hoping for a glitch, a skipped frame, a compression artifact, something. But no. The timestamp was clean, the feed steady. The man, I, walked right past the camera, waving once, then heading into the trees with the easy confidence of someone who belonged there. I checked my phone's sleep tracker out of morbid curiosity. It showed 7 hours of solid rest. No steps recorded, no notifications. So where the hell had the other me come from? By noon, I was back up the ridge, even though every nerve told me not to be. The woods were still, snow shining like glass under the low sun. My boot prints from the last trip were frozen solid. I found new ones, fresher, tracing the same route toward the cabin. They matched mine perfectly. The door was painted red now. I stopped cold. Yesterday it was bare wood. The color gleamed wet, even though the paint was dry to the touch. The brush strokes were precise, too even. Whoever had done it had a steadier hand than mine. Inside, it looked lived in. The fireplace was cleaned and stacked with fresh kindling. A cot stood neatly against the wall. The whole place smelled faintly of cedar and smoke, like someone had been nesting here for days. On the table sat a stack of old Polaroids. My gut clenched before I even touched them. Each photo showed me working, repairing the roof, painting the door, replacing the window glass. Every picture was taken from angles that matched my trail cam footage. The final photo on top showed me standing in the doorway, smiling. On the back, in my handwriting, "You're almost done." I dropped them like they were hot. The walls creaked softly, wood swelling with heat from the fire that hadn't been lit. I turned to leave, but the doorknob wouldn't turn. It wasn't stuck. It pulsed. warm under my hand, almost like skin. That's when I heard the hammering again. Not on the roof this time, beneath me. The floorboards trembled. Dust drifted from the rafters. The sound was steady. 3 hits, pause, 3 more. I knelt and pressed my ear to the boards. Faintly, under the hammering, a man's voice hummed the same tune I hum when I work. I stood, heart thudding, and shouted, "Who's down there?" The hammering stopped. Then the voice answered, quiet but clear. "You are." I backed toward the door. The knob turned easily now, almost too easily, and swung open on its own. Outside, the trail was full of footprints, mine again, leading down toward the creek. I followed them because I couldn't not. My breath fogged in the cold, merging with the faint smell of pine tar and smoke that clung to everything. The prints ended at the edge of the frozen creek. The ice was thick, but right at the center something dark shifted below the surface. I knelt, scraping snow away until I could see through. A reflection looked back, my face, staring up through the ice. But this version's eyes were open wide, unblinking. Its lips moved slowly, forming words I couldn't hear. I leaned closer. The ice cracked under my gloves. A sharp pop echoed through the trees. I flinched back, heart pounding. When I looked again, the reflection was gone, just cold water and silt. I ran all the way to the truck, not caring about the cameras or the gear. At the station, I deleted every file from the memory cards and dumped the footage drives in the burn barrel behind the maintenance shed. The flames hissed green for a moment, like metal burning. When the smoke cleared, my supervisor's voice came over the radio. "Dunlap, we've got movement again up by McCready's place. You already up there?" My throat went dry. "No, sir. Not today." A pause. Then casually, "Funny. We've got your truck on satellite parked right out front." When I stepped outside to check, my own tire tracks led away from the station, straight back toward the cabin I swore I'd just fled. I don't remember getting in my truck. 1 second I was standing behind the station, the radio hissing in my hand. The next, my windshield was full of snow and pines, and my headlights were catching the cabin at the top of the ridge. The porch light was on now. It cast a thin yellow glow that didn't reach the tree line, just a lonely circle, like a stage waiting for its actor. The door was open. I stepped out into air so cold it burned my lungs. Each breath hung heavy and slow, the kind that makes sound travel strange. I should have turned back. I told myself that over and over, but something about that open door felt like a dare. Inside, the cabin was perfect. No cobwebs, no dust, every board sanded, every nail flush. The fire in the hearth burned steady, but the logs never turned to ash. They just kept glowing, and there I was. Standing in the far corner, hammer in hand. I looked healthier, almost content. Same uniform, same scars, same tired eyes. He smiled when he saw me, like we'd been expecting each other. "Almost finished," he said. I shook my head. "You're not real." He set the hammer down gently. "Then why do you feel better when I'm working?" I didn't answer. The floor creaked between us, expanding with heat. He walked toward the fireplace, gesturing at the freshly hung frames on the wall. "See? It's not a ruin anymore. It's home." Each frame held a photo, me repairing the cabin, cleaning it, sitting at the table writing reports I didn't remember making. But one frame, larger than the rest, showed something new. Me lying on the floor, eyes closed, a faint smile on my face. "You did good," the other me said softly. "You kept it standing." My stomach turned. "You mean you kept it standing?" "I didn't—" "You came back," he interrupted. "That's all it needed." I stepped back toward the door, but he moved faster. His hand gripped my shoulder, warm, calloused, familiar. The air shimmered, and for a heartbeat, I saw double, both of us, overlapping like 2 exposures of the same film. Then came the sound, a heartbeat, 2, 3. Then the steady rhythm of hammering again, but it wasn't coming from outside. It was inside my skull, syncing perfectly with my pulse. He leaned close. The cabin was empty too long. It needed a caretaker. I tried to speak, but my jaw wouldn't move. My vision wavered, color draining to gray. The smell of sawdust filled my nose. He stepped back, expression calm. "You can rest now. I've got it." The world flickered. For an instant I saw from his perspective, looking down at myself, slumped, pale, eyes half open. He knelt, closed my eyelids with care, and whispered something I couldn't quite hear. Then, darkness. When I came to, I was standing at the window, looking out over the ridge. My body moved without asking. The hammer felt natural in my hand. The fire glowed behind me, steady, patient. I turned, saw the walls glowing faintly in the firelight. Fresh varnish. The boards looked alive, almost breathing. Outside, I caught a flash of headlights, someone pulling up the road. Another ranger, maybe. For a second, I felt panic rise in my throat, but then, something in me, deep, quiet, satisfied, smoothed it away. "Almost finished," I heard myself whisper. I walked to the door, smiling as the light of a new morning touched the porch. They found my truck a week later, empty. GPS showed it hadn't moved. The cabin, once condemned, now stands perfectly restored, roof intact, paint fresh, chimney clean. The logs still smell of pine and varnish. There's a ranger assigned to the area now, a new guy. He says sometimes, when he checks the trail cameras, he sees me inside, hammer in hand, finishing what he started. They call it McReady Cabin again now, but the official report lists it under my name, Dunlap Cabin, maintained by current caretaker. And I never did clock out. I'm the guy people call when their cabins list after a hard winter. I jack up sagging corners, sister rotten joists, rehang doors that learned bad habits. I charge fair, I don't talk much, and I keep receipts in a Folgers can. If it's wood and it's in these hills, I've put a hand to it. This job was on a spur road above a half-empty lake, past a church that only rings its bell on Tuesdays. Owner was an out-of-stater with a voice like voicemail. Mr. Something. He said the porch sloped funny, the back bedroom door wouldn't latch, and the stovepipe rapped at night, like someone was tapping to get out. He laughed when he said that. I didn't. The cabin was WPA style. Chestnut logs, stone piers, low crawl space that smelled like cold mushrooms. First look, I figured the usual. Frost heave, rain sneaking under flashing, powder post beetle in the sill plate chewing slow. I set my level on the porch rail. Bubble drifted left. No surprise. I chalked a line, pulled a measurement off the corner, and got under there with a jack and 2 screw posts. Here's where it got off. The dirt under the southwest pier wasn't dirt anymore. It had gone to a kind of soft clinker like somebody burned coal down there a long time ago and forgot to scrape the ash. The post base should have sunk easy, but when I pressed it, the ground resisted and then gave in a way that felt, not springy, breathing. I told myself I was feeling my own pulse. I set the jack, cribbed with oak blocks, and started the lift. The porch groaned. Good sound. I slid the first post into place and snugged it. Went to the back bedroom next. Door was racked half an inch out of square. I planed the hinge side. Added a shim, reset the strike. Clean latch, satisfying click. I wrote it down with the other small wins. Refastened loose stair tread, reset 2 deck screws, replaced 3 handrail nails with structural screws because nails creep and screws don't. By late afternoon, I had the porch level within 1/8 and the bedroom closing smooth. I even reseeded the stovepipe collar with high-temp cement. The tapping, I told the voicemail man when he called, was expansion. Metal talks when it gets cold. I packed my tools and took a last wander with the torpedo level. Habit. In the living room, I set it on the windowsill. Bubble kissed the right line. I blinked. I'd swear an hour ago it kissed the left. I flipped the tool end for end to be sure. The bubble slid the same direction, slow as a clot, like the glass tube itself leaned. "Stop it," I said, out loud to nothing. I chalked another line across the floorboards to mark the current level and penciled the time on the wall. 5:12. When I straightened, the pencil lead snapped. Not on a knot, just crushed in my fingers. Wind came up around then, bringing that sour creek smell cabins get in thaw. The stovepipe ticked twice without heat. The newly fixed bedroom door drifted open an inch against latch and gravity. I shut it. It drifted open again, but not from the latch side, from the hinge side, like the jamb had bowed inward while I watched. "Humidity," I told the room. "Mountain breath." I went back under for one more look, another habit. The crawl space was close, a pancake crawl, your lungs pushing dust every time you moved. My headlamp found the jack post. The oak block had sunk a quarter inch, not into mud, into that clinker ash. Around it, the ash had formed a shallow, crisp-edged ring, like lips. I should have reset the cribbing. I should have added a second post and called it a day. Instead, I lay still and listened. The cabin was quiet in that wrong way that steals the ring from your ears. After a minute, a nail whispered, a tiny squeal of steel dragging across dry wood. Another answered, 2 joists over, then another. One by one, the nails along the sill backed their heads a hair's breadth out, as if a magnet under the house was easing them home. "You're settling," I said, because giving it a name felt like keeping it small. I backed out, hard up, and checked the chalk line I'd laid across the living room floor. It had shifted, not smudged, not scuffed. Shifted, as if the boards themselves had moved and taken my line with them. I set my level again on the windowsill, watching the bubble. It slid left, paused. Then, slow as a breath in a sleeping chest, it slid back the other way without my hands on it. The studs gave a soft, dry sigh, and the bubble on my level crept uphill. The next morning, I drove back up expecting the usual, boards swelling from dew, maybe a shoddy screw let go overnight. But the minute I turned onto the ridge road, I felt it. The kind of pressure drop that tells you a storm's about to start. Only the sky was perfectly still. The porch looked wrong before I even parked. The new posts I'd set had tilted outward, like knees giving way under a heavy load. The door I'd planed shut was hanging half open, hinge pins creeping up as if pushed from inside. "God almighty," I muttered, slinging my tool belt over my shoulder. I'd barely touched the first post before the smell hit, wet soil and iron. The concrete pier under the corner sweated dark moisture that wasn't water. The damp streaks looked rusty, almost bloody. I grabbed my level again. The porch bubble didn't sit anywhere. It drifted side to side, never finding center. I tightened my grip until my knuckles went white. Not possible. Inside, things had shifted. The floorboards had swollen apart by half an inch, and fine wood dust lined the seams like breadcrumbs. Every nail head I'd driven sat proud again, little silver eyes staring up at me. Someone, or something, had pulled them out. I found my chalk line on the wall. My handwriting, 5:12, was still there, but stretched longer, like the wall had expanded overnight. The line itself wasn't straight anymore. It bowed upward in the middle, forming a lazy smile. I should have left right then, but curiosity's a disease in my trade. I went back under the cabin to check my jacks. They were gone. Not fallen. Gone. Only shallow rings left in the ash, smooth and circular, as if the metal had melted straight through the dirt. The air under there was warmer than it should have been, almost humid, carrying that sour, creosote tang old chimneys get when something died in them years ago. A dry click sounded to my left. I turned the headlamp that way and saw the beam catch a dozen tiny glints, nail heads shifting one by one, threading backward out of the joists. Each turn made a faint squeal, the sound of something unscrewing from inside the wood. I scrambled backward until I hit daylight. My heart felt like it was trying to leave my chest. Back on the porch, I yanked out my phone to call the owner. No signal, not even SOS. The ridge had swallowed the bars whole. Fine. I'd pack up, drive back down, and send a report. I turned toward my truck and stopped cold. The road was narrower. I don't mean it looked narrower. The trees had actually leaned in, branches clawing across the gravel like ribs closing around a wound. I could still squeeze through, but it would scrape the sides. Behind me, the porch creaked. The sound wasn't random. It was rhythmic, deliberate. One long groan, two short, then another long. A beat pattern, like breathing. I stepped backward toward the truck, keeping my eyes on the cabin. The siding shifted. Logs slid a fraction, overlapping tighter. The structure seemed to tense, pulling inward. The bedroom door slammed. That was enough. I threw my tools into the truck bed and gunned it down the narrow path. Branches screeched against metal, sap streaking the windshield. I didn't look in the mirrors until I hit the paved road. When I finally did, I wished I hadn't. The ridge behind me had changed shape. The cabin roofline wasn't visible anymore, just a dark bulge under the treetops, like the mountain itself had hunched forward and swallowed it whole. I told myself it was fog. Mountain heat does that sometimes, warps air, bends distance. But the road beneath my wheels thrummed, subtle but steady, as if the earth under me were still moving, still settling. That night, back home, I poured 2 fingers of bourbon and tried to write up an invoice. I kept my notes short, factual. Reset pier supports, repaired framing, recommend no occupancy. But when I checked the paper later, the words had shifted, letters cramped together like they were suffocating. It didn't say no occupancy anymore. It said no escape. The next morning, the client called, not to complain, but to ask why I'd left my jack still under the cabin, when I knew damn well it had vanished into the ground. The owner's voice crackled through my phone like bad AM radio. "Hey, you left your jack under there. My caretaker saw it when he drove by. Said it's sticking out from the crawl space. Thought you should know before someone steals it." My stomach dropped. "No one drove by," I said. "There's no caretaker." He laughed it off, said something about locals keeping an eye out, but I wasn't listening. The jack was gone. Gone. I'd seen the marks in the dirt myself. Still, I couldn't stand the thought of a stranger poking around my work. So, against every better instinct I had, I went back. The mountain was gray and swollen with fog that afternoon. The air felt thicker than the day before, like walking into breath that wasn't mine. I parked halfway up the drive and finished the climb on foot. The cabin looked wrong again. The porch rail was gone entirely, posts warped into a bowing curve that leaned toward the front door. I couldn't see my chalk line from the yard anymore. The entire cabin had sunk lower, closer to the soil. I crouched near the crawl space. Sure enough, a piece of metal glinted from the shadows. My jack. Half buried. I pulled it free, and the ground moved. Not shifting like loose soil, but rising and falling, a slow exhale. The air from below smelled like wet timber and rot. The jack handle was hot to the touch, almost pulsing. And the base plate had fused with something dark and fibrous. Not dirt, not root, something halfway between the two. I dropped it and scrambled out from under. The porch boards rippled like something heavy crawled beneath them. Then the front door creaked open. Inside, dust swirled in slow spirals. My level and notebook sat on the table exactly where I hadn't left them. The notebook's pages were turning themselves, like wind that wasn't there was flipping through. On the open page, my handwriting was wrong. Longer strokes, harder pressure, like someone mimicking me with more confidence than I ever had. "She's still settling," it said. The floor beneath me flexed. I could hear the studs expanding, tiny wooden pops, grain fibers stretching. The walls drew closer by inches, the sound like knuckles cracking in deep sequence. "Stop," I said, because talking made me feel real. "You're wood, that's all. Wood can't think." But the cabin answered. It groaned like a living throat, a sound that started deep in the foundation and worked up through the roof beams until the nails screamed. My flashlight beam jumped across the ceiling and landed on something dripping through a split seam in the boards. It wasn't water. It was sap, black as tar. It dripped steadily onto the table, each drop hitting right where my name was signed on the invoice form. I took a step back. The boards underfoot rose to meet me, soft as breathing flesh. I ran for the door. The frame had closed around it. The jamb had shifted, swallowing the latch completely. I kicked once, twice. The second kick sank deep, leaving my boot stuck in pine that gave like meat. From behind me came a cracking sound. The wall where the fireplace sat was bulging outward, bricks separating with the slow patience of a yawn. Smoke leaked through the cracks, but it wasn't gray. It was brown, dense, and smelled of hot sawdust. Inside that smoke, something turned. The outline of rafters, or ribs, the heart of the place, the mountain's pulse. I yanked my boot free and climbed through the nearest window. The frame scraped my shoulder raw, but the outside air hit cold and real. The whole cabin was breathing now, the roofline rising and falling like a lung. As I stumbled into the yard, the porch collapsed inward, boards folding like a closing fist. From the crawl space came one last, long exhale, warm enough to ruffle my hair. Then silence. I never saw the owner again. The listing disappeared 2 days later. But sometimes, when the wind comes down from that ridge, I hear the groan of shifting timber, slow, steady, the sound of something still settling. And when I sleep, I dream of that cabin, crooked, heavy, patient, pressing down through soil until it finds my house, waiting underneath mine like it's next in line to fix. The other night, my kitchen floor dipped 1/2 inch. I nailed it level, but by morning, the bubble on my level had slid uphill again. That's all for this episode, but the nightmares don't end here. Subscribe for daily horror stories, leave a like if you want more, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.